Let's have a little chat. You guys know about the research study of like basically testing kids' ability to have like delayed gratification, where like they're offered a snack, but like they get okay. I can't remember the exact like study. I'd have to go back and reread it, but basically they brought in a bunch of different kids. They were offered, I think it was candy, marshmallows. I remember now. It was marshmallows. They were offered one marshmallow immediately. However, if they waited, they would get more marshmallows. Some of them waited, some of them didn't, and it was concluded that, oh, well, kids that are able to wait longer have like higher intelligence. And to an extent, that is true. Generally speaking, people who are capable of delayed gratification do tend to be more intelligent. But there was another lesser talked about takeaway from that study. Excuse me. Another takeaway was that intelligence was a result of kids having better upbringing. And what I mean is this. The kids that just instantly took the one marshmallow were more so kids that had like impoverished backgrounds. It was kids who were of a lesser income than the kids that were able to wait. Like, it is verifiable proof, right, that if you give kids the resources that they need when they're growing up, they have a higher likelihood of being successful later in life. You give kids a good home, plenty of food on the table, and you give them the support they need from whatever parental figures they might have in their life, then yeah, no shit. They grow up to be a lot smarter. Maybe they have more of a drive. But, like, yeah. Saying it out loud, it's like, no duh, right? Now let me ask you something. Do you, as we speak right now, feel like you are getting enough out of life? I mean just like right now, as we speak. Are you satisfied with your life? If you live in the United States, probably not. I would probably hazard a guess that if you're watching this video, you might not have a lot. You might have just some shitty apartments, you know, that you pay like over a fucking grand for, even though it's a piece of fucking like shit that someone cobbled together out of whatever bricks they had lying around. You probably work either minimum wage or just barely above it. Hell, maybe you don't have a full-time job. You might be delivering for Uber or something. Or maybe you're doing all of it. Maybe you're working a full-time job, a part-time job, and delivering pizzas for someone on the side. And still, despite everything, despite how many resumes you put in, despite how presentable you make yourself during an interview, despite any connections you might have built, despite any vouchers you might have had from friends, despite everything you do, you still probably have not been able to move upwards on the ladder. And that's by design. I'm not the first to see it, and I will not be the last. Shit sucks right now because people can't fucking afford to live. We work our asses off. Some of us just gave up. We see how rigged the system is, so we just throw in the towel. We're like, fuck this, I'm going on welfare. Right? The system is rigged against us, and the people on top of the corporate ladder Yeah, this is rivals. Anyway, and people on top of the corporate ladder, they want us to keep trying to climb up it because supposedly if we just work harder, things get better.
Can't really afford to give a fuck either.
And what Nella just said, with as much as we're squeezed, it's really hard to care. So, you might hear about the news that someone had just burned down a warehouse. I think it was in Ontario, if I'm not mistaken. Correct me if I'm wrong in the comments. But yeah, a Amazon worker, was it Amazon? Whatever. Point is, a warehouse worker that was barely making enough to put food on his table was just like, fuck this. Grabbed a lighter because a lighter was cheaper than a fucking meal. That's the fucked up world we live in. He just went in, literally recorded himself burning down the fucking warehouse. It was like a whole warehouse supply of toilet paper that he just lit ablaze. When questioned, he referenced Luigi Mangione, who you might remember from last year as having killed a healthcare CEO. And just like last time, you might have heard about this and thought, well, sucks to suck. Because you know how these CEOs operate, you know the kind of shit they do. And knowing the kind of shit they do, both to their workers and to even people high up on the ladders, you probably find it very hard to empathize with these people. But you find it very easy to empathize with the people actually doing the thing. You know, people either burning down warehouses or killing CEOs. And here we are now. This shit has already happened twice now, at least twice as far as we can tell in the news. I guarantee you there's probably been more subtle instances of this, probably throughout maybe last year, maybe the year before, but maybe the news hadn't talked about it until recently. But I guarantee you this shit's probably, if it's not happening more frequently, people are thinking about it. And I'm going to be honest, every time I try to find this anytime I try to find this in mainstream news, they just aren't really talking about what's actually happening. Like, they'll say the usual spiel, like, this worker has burned down this warehouse in an act of violence. So it's like, first of all, it's not violence. To call it violence implies that someone was hurt, killed, or at the very least threatened. That is not what's happening. A strung-out worker who is barely making enough to afford to eat, in an act of desperation, burned down the warehouse supply. In the video, he references "we," obviously referring to himself and the other workers. But of course, they're not going to talk about that. They just show the video of him lighting a flame and then being like, look how violent this is. I feel my controller vibrating. Hold on. I will gladly take that. Anyway, so yeah, they will obviously talk about what they perceive as violence. You know, that being burning down, a warehouse. But what they won't talk about is the conditions that led this person to feel like this was all they could do. Because at the end of the day, that's what's really happening. Now look, I don't like violence. I don't think anyone with a sane head on their shoulders likes violence. It's not just unproductive, it's wrong, right? Like, on a moral level, it's not a good thing to do. And I say this as someone who, for at least most of my life, has valued the sanctity of life, especially human life. It's why I ended up making this series. I wanted to talk about things that need to be talked about. Because at the end of the day, if society is ever going to improve, we have to have these harder conversations. And at the end of the day, this is what happens when you take a population of people who are otherwise just regular, hardworking, and even loving people, and you push them to their absolute mental and physical limits. One day, when you haven't really thought about it, one day when it just seems like another, just another day doing what they do, they finally just snap. They have enough. They realize that they just can't keep going with what the status quo is. They can't just go to work that day because they know they're going to burn more energy. They're going to waste more of their time. They've only got so much time on this earth before, well, they're, you know, like, we all have less than 100 years, maybe just over 100 if we're lucky. I thought that was collectible. Anyway, all of us only have a limited time on this earth, and it's a waste to spend it literally working ourselves to the bone. Most people don't want to do that. Many of us value our time, and we try to spend our time with the people and the interests that we actually care about. Whether that be with our friends or our family, maybe it's a hobby that we devote our time to, maybe it's a career that we build up to. And for most of us, spending that time doing things that we don't want or don't care about, it just feels awful. Like we were put on this earth to do something more meaningful and we just can't. That sucks. We shouldn't be putting up with this. And as much as I don't like violence, I see what happened at that warehouse as nothing more than just a normal person who was pushed to his absolute limit and finally snapped. We've all heard the story of the killdozer, right? Some guy who had some kind of mental issues who went on a rampage with a bulldozer. They covered in cement armor basically. What they don't tell you is what led up to that point. He was trying to run a business and he was strung out to his absolute limit, just trying to live. And what he did with that bulldozer was just him snapping. He had just had enough. And it's also worth talking about the fact that in that incident, no one was hurt. Nobody was killed. Property destruction is not violence. To call it violence implies that someone was physically harmed or someone was maybe attacked emotionally or that some kind of abuse was happening. But just like the quote-unquote killdozer incident, what's happening now with this warehouse, I'm sorry, but that's not violence. You could argue that Luigi Mangione was violent because of what he allegedly did, but even so, violent or not, this is what happens when you take a person and you just string them along. You just keep pushing them over again. Eventually, they just can't do it anymore. Like I said, I don't like violence. I don't think most people do either. But as much as I want to condemn violence, I also want to make it clear that none of this is normal, right? People should not be put to these kinds of extremes. And honestly, if you want a less violent world, you should be less willing to allow people to gaslight you into thinking that anything less than, a roof over your head or food on your table, I think what I'm trying to get at is this. I do not care about a warehouse being burned down. I care about what led to that happening. I care about the person who burned it down having been just completely worked to the bone. And then finally he decides, I can't do this anymore. I must revolt. That is basically what must have been going through his head. And I'm just going to say it. What the highest class of the world is currently doing to us, I think that's violence. Because what they are doing is directly harming billions of people right now as we speak. Withholding money from people that would otherwise be used to feed themselves and their families, withholding medicine that would be healing the sick otherwise, withholding anything that a person needs to just do the basic functions of living, that is violence. Because what they are doing is directly hurting a person. Let's not get it twisted, okay? That is violence. Burning down a building, right? Especially a building where no one ended up getting trapped in, everyone got out, everyone was safe. That's not violence. His anger was very clearly not directed towards people working in the warehouse. It was directed towards this forced status quo that he was forced to uphold. It wasn't just anger, it was grief. It was a person who mourned for a life that he was deprived of. So no, I don't feel bad for any of these executives or CEOs who may have made a little bit less money because a building got lost. Boo fucking who. I don't care about that. Because that's not where the real violence is. And they're gonna fucking gaslight you, right? They're gonna tell you, oh, but this is violent, because what if someone was in the building? But that wasn't the case. Everyone got out, everyone was alive, and besides, he very directly said that that was not where his anger was. Also, I can't help but find it hilarious that literally in the video he says that the money he spent on that, like, lighter. I mean, think about it, right? A lighter that you can pick up from like a gas station is like what, $2, maybe $3. I don't know. I don't smoke, so I don't look at the prices of lighters. God, I wish I could grill. Like, I don't have a grill, so I can't do that. But like, anyway, point being, lighters are cheap, right? You can pick them up at gas stations for like a few bucks. You know how much it would cost to feed your family just for one day? Like, just one meal, right? One meal. If you wanted to feed, let's say, 3 people, a mother, yourself, and whatever kid you had, assuming you were just this guy, right, working at a warehouse, if you wanted to feed just 3 people, actually, no. Let's actually slim this out. Let's say you want to feed one person, yourself, right? You want to feed one person for a day. I guarantee you it's going to cost a lot more than whatever that lighter cost. It's so fucking backwards. And yet these people will try to fucking gaslight us into thinking that any of this is okay and that we should actually be grateful. There's another collectible around here somewhere. Also, there's an NPC somewhere and I don't know where. Hold on.
A coin? Maybe 2 coins.
Why not?
Have yourself a good day. Anything
Anyway.
Anyone can give me,
But yeah,
please help me.
in short, yeah, the world's pretty fucked up right now. We know the reason why. And
Can
we
anybody
tried
show me
doing
some
this with
kindness?
protesting, but that hasn't worked. So don't be surprised if we end up getting more Luigis in the world.
Fight E.
I don't like it. Like I said, I don't like violence. I play violent games, but this is fiction, right? As much as I like games like GTA and Red Dead, they're not real. I don't want real world violence. But god damn it, I am not surprised, right?
Corn. Fight E.
Like why should I be?
Anything.
Like why should I be surprised when people who have been pushed to their absolute limit lash out like this?
Can
And
anybody
unless
show me
some
some
real
kindness?
fundamental change happens in the world, and this is just going to keep happening. I think we're only seeing the start of it.
Anything.
But
Anyone can
yeah,
give me,
I think that's
please
it for
help
now.
me.
I'm out.